and let's record. I'm just going to review what I just was saying there about the task 4. Please make sure that you include incident management and multi-tiered service support in the service desk. If you do that, you're going to do better. We want to finish today this chapter, this is like our third crack at it. When I say that, I mean it's the third lesson that we've referred to this continuity management. And if you can remember everything that we've spoken of before, we did talk about continuity management being dealing with those issues that threaten the existence of our business. And those things we refer to as disasters or catastrophes, and we saw a spectrum where disasters or catastrophes were laid out in that spectrum. And we even talked about 3 different kinds of disasters or catastrophes affecting the infrastructure or the people, or both the infrastructure and the people. And we did talk about this. This slide here shouldn't be the first time that you saw it, nor this one. We talked about the strategy in terms of recovering. So you might remember that we talked about RTO and RPO. So our time and our point of recovery, those things, looking forward and looking back, and putting some numbers on how long we can be without a service, or how much of that service we have to roll back to. So here in these slides that I'm just going through quickly, I'm not going to sort of discuss them a lot, but about the different recovery strategies. The shorter the time for the recovery, the more expensive it's going to be, the more complicated, the more equipment involved, the more people, the more network, etc. And so, I mean, the last sort of well, yeah, that was the one there. Immediate recovery, that's incredibly expensive because you have to have all kinds of duplication. And if you go to a sort of a more cold sort of backup, then that's a lot cheaper. And what you could do with your business is you could separate different components of the business and have those components of the business that are more critical have some kind of an immediate recovery applied to them, where parts of the business which are less critical, you could sort of do some kind of backup and recover over a bit more time. So this next, it's only like 3 slides. So let's just have a look at that. The idea here is, so we hopefully are all convinced now that we should have some kind of plan in place to recover from a disaster. So we could call that a disaster recovery plan. We should have that in place, and then what these slides are talking about is how should we go about doing that? Well, hopefully we can see in this slide that that must come as a top-down sort of decision. What I mean by top-down decision, as it says here, it should come from the executive management, from the top of the company or the top of the organization. They must be involved in that planning, because it's the only way that you're going to get the resources required for a proper disaster recovery plan. Now, bearing in mind the fact that it's quite possible that you could go through years, maybe decades, in a business environment or a government environment where you didn't have a disaster. It's quite possible, I suppose. Disasters are not that common. We don't have sort of tidal waves coming all the time, or tsunamis. We don't have sort of electrical sort of failures happening every day. And so it's the kind of thing that if you're not sort of having the outlook, either as individuals or as a company, of being prepared, it's the kind of thing that can kind of slip by you. If you don't really have a planning or a forward outlook, it's the kind of thing that can kind of slip by you. And that, maybe that's fine. I mean, maybe you can stay in business for 6 months, 10 months, or years. Who knows? But the thing is, it could mean that you could be susceptible to a knockout blow from some kind of catastrophe, and catastrophe as simple as the building being flooded. You know what I mean? That could be a catastrophe to your business. If your servers got wet, boom, if you haven't got any kind of a disaster recovery plan, that kind of thing could be. I mean, and even here in the desert, this kind of thing could happen, right? We could have a leaky roof. And some of you might remember not that long ago, it's like 2013, where there were jet skis riding in the tunnels of the freeway here in Doha, because they had a kind of 3 or 4 days of pretty hard rain, and that some of it sort of collected in some low parts of the roads. And yeah, I mean, if so, if you're building, and think about it, you're building, right? Nobody wants to spend money that they don't want to spend, right? And so, if it only rains like 2 days a year, you might have buildings that are built without people thinking too much about it leaking. And if your servers are in that situation, could be kind of bad. And so that's what I mean. Maybe your business, you don't care about that, but to be honest, it would be probably better for you if you did. All right, so that kind of decision making needs to come from the top, and responsibility has to be directly made, right? These people are responsible for that. And ultimate responsibility is always going to be at the top of the organization. I mean, they can say, all right, so I'm going to have somebody in the IT department take this responsibility for that. But ultimately, it has to come from the top of the organization. And it has to be some kind of a partnership between the IT wing or department of the company and the business people. Okay, so what can we do? We can do some kind of tests. Now, I want you to think of these testings as kind of like the fire drills that we have here at the college. And we had one like a month ago, I think. So basically, the idea there is that we would see what would happen. We would walk through, we have a hypothetical disaster, and then we go through and see if the people that are supposed to be and the processes that are supposed to be there to take care of that disaster, if they actually work. And as it says here, we can do a walkthrough, we can do a full test involving somebody outside the company. What's good about getting somebody outside is this idea of independence. That is, that they don't really have we say, they don't have skin in the game, or that's just the euphemism. They don't have a ongoing interest in in a decision one way or another. So they're fully independent from the company, and so they can look at it from the point of view, well, this isn't going to affect me personally, so I can just look at it objectively and come up with a decision that works objectively, as opposed to, well, I've got my little thing going on in this company, and this disaster recovery plan doesn't really work for me because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Could be, because I want the money for something else. All right, so an independent person is going to not have those kind of restrictions on the way they think. So we could do a full test involving somebody from outside that looks at the whole sort of impact of a disaster. We could have a partial test where only certain parts of the disaster recovery plan are tested. And yeah, the idea of the scenarios, basically this requires a little bit of I guess creativity, I suppose. Is, can you sit down and you can think of, well, this could happen, that could happen. Maybe it has a low probability, but this probability is not zero, and therefore we should still plan for it. And if this happened, what would be here? So really, it's all about what if this happened, then what if that happened? Or, okay, so here's the people that we're going to get to track that in that case. Okay, so once we've got our strategy in place, we have people that are taking responsibility for that. We know what we're going to do in the event of a disaster. We practice that a bit, and it could be that we involve those same kind of people that do the practices for human safety in the event of a fire. They could be they could be brought into this disaster recovery, and probably should be. Then we could do some training of our people. We can have a regular testing of our disaster recovery, and etc. audit. I don't know if you're familiar with the term audit. Usually, we think about it in terms of accounting, and that's because auditing is done in accounting to make sure that the way we keep our records is legal and is focusing on the responsibilities of the people involved in the organization. But audits can be for other things besides financial. So we can have an audit of our IT processes, an audit of our disaster recovery processes. And basically, what that kind of audit would be looking at to see if the plan that we have, it would be comparing the actual stuff on the ground with the plan that we have. So the plan says that in each department, we're going to have certain people that take responsibility for the physical safety of the people and the equipment. And so an audit could be, we go to that department and we see who is responsible and how do they know they're responsible and do they have a plan and do they know what to do? So that's what we mean by an audit. And that audit should be done by somebody who's a little bit independent as well. You can't just sort of go and ask people to say, can you please write an audit on what you're doing? No, you have to get somebody outside for the same reason I mentioned on the hypothetical scenarios. And with all things, continuous improvement. As we do our practices of disaster recovery, we'll see that some things work and some things don't, and we'll change things to make it so that it's more efficient and more effective as we go forward. And I think that's the end. So it is. Um, what I'd like to do now is